Welcome back to Junction 119. This is Kellen.
This is Kason.
And I'm Dylan Canya.
There it is. He uses his full name. I love it too. We another week, another guest. We have another good friend of ours, another Bowling Green alumnus, and another Sports Corner alumnus joining us for this entire show. Dylan Canya, how you doing, my friend?
I'm doing well, doing well. Thanks for having me on the show today, gents.
Absolutely. We're something that kind of happened 2 weeks ago when we did like our college football preview with friend of the show Matt. Another friend of the show, I should say, is we kept using the term massive to refer to our our preview, and it's like, hey, we need to do a massive NFL preview. So let's get some NFL experts up in here. Kason, how are you doing, my friend, my usual co-host?
Yeah, I am doing well, doing well.
That
Starting the week off, busy work week. You know how that goes.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, based on what I do, as I mentioned, I think last week or the week before, I'm actually the least busy this time of week.
Yeah.
So
right.
yeah, my
Right.
busiest days were right over the weekend. So back to chilling. But thank you in advance for joining us, Dylan. Why don't you go ahead and say what your affiliations are, just for
Yeah.
the listeners who may not know you as well.
Yeah, no. So my affiliation is all Cleveland sports. Born and raised Cleveland, Ohio. So basically brought into misery and pain for my 28 years of life outside of 2016 when the Cavs won the championship. But Cleveland Browns, Cleveland Guardians, Cleveland Cavaliers all the way. Also support the Blue Jackets, kind of wishy-washy though, just as a hockey team that I picked up. I like to stay in state when I root for professional sports franchises. So
I love that. I wanted you to say all that because though Kaysen is a Browns fan and the registered Browns fan for this podcast, he's not a Cleveland fan in everything. Most notably, literally a championship won since we've had this show of his hockey team. That he not even really adopted, but you are all things Cleveland and really kind of Ohio in general. So that kind of gives you a perspective of savoring the wins, I should say, a little bit more, and
yeah,
also with a sense of realism. Mm-hmm.
I mean, honestly, it just makes you appreciate sports a lot more, especially when your teams are doing well. I mean, we're going to be talking about them later, but there's a lot of hype around the Browns this year. We had some really good Guardians teams that passed when they were formerly known as the Indians, back in the mid 2010s, and then the Cavs we had the LeBron era. So it's just like the ebbs and flows make you appreciate sports a lot more.
Yeah, it's
But
like
we've
it's
also
almost
had
like
an 0-16, so it's like
you did,
you
and I
know.
think this is fair for both you guys. It's almost like the Browns are the one Cleveland team in our lifetime that haven't had their era yet. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And I don't want us to jump ahead too much. This is going to be a almost entirely NFL show. We might get a little bit of Kaysen's thoughts about some pop culture stuff at the very end of the show with another thing that I thought about bringing up as well that I'll surprise with you guys later. But we are going to go division by division, around the horn eventually here. And we're going to give kind of our official predictions, things along that nature. And you can chime in whenever you want. But we're going to start with the Trey Lance news because I really do want to hear your guys' take on it. It's probably the most notable. I swear there's always one per year. There's some big name or some big shift that happens right as the season's literally around the corner within 2 weeks. We got it last Friday, if I'm not mistaken, because I lose track of my days. This is where I'm going to rely on Kaysen to pull up the details, but I'm pretty sure it was just like Trey Lance traded from the San Francisco 49ers to the Dallas Cowboys for just a straight up 2024 fourth round pick. Thoughts, reactions, concerns,
I mean,
condolences.
classic Jerry move. Let's be honest. Like
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
is this is Jerry not happy with Dak Prescott. I mean, there was if we think to just the quarterback situation in Dallas, Dak Prescott probably has a year to max left, depending on what his deal is and how the team performs, especially this year. I mean, there's playoff expectations with him. And when he got hurt last year, and I'm blanking on the quarterback's name that ended up winning like 4 or 5 games in his absence. Like they were
It
calling
was
for him to
Cooper Rush, I believe.
Cooper Rush,
Yeah,
yes. Like the fact that Cooper Rush like won all those games without Dak Prescott, being that starting quarterback there, kind of put that, I think, that thought into Jerry's mind in this trade for Trey Lance this year. He's still kind of an unknown. He got hurt in San Francisco. So, still has that massive first round potential that he was picked as there. And Jerry giving up a fourth round to maybe have Dak Prescott's replacement already on the bench is value for them, but interesting for Trey Lance's situation.
Jason?
I would just like to circle back as to how we got here with Trey Lance. So this was so in his draft, I believe it was the 21 draft. The San Francisco 49ers gave up 3 first-round picks and a third-round pick to trade up with the Dolphins to draft him at number 3. And the Dolphins turned those picks into Jalen Waddle, Tyreek Hill, Bradley Chubb, and Channing Tindall. So,
see,
I mean, Channing Tindall, I think, is a rookie this year, so we don't really know for sure. But 3 like Pro Bowl players at least.
That's true. The thing about that though, every time I see a comparison like that made, it's like the Herschel Walker trade that also involved the Cowboys. Back in whatever that was, the 80s, where they got like every piece of their eventual dynasty in the Herschel Walker trade. And it's like, oh, lopsided trade. But I'm like, I feel like most trades with many draft picks can look lopsided after like 5-6 years. So people dogging the 49ers for that specifically, like it's sort of like the whole Browns could have taken Ben thing that I know I've talked to both of you about. It's like, okay, yeah, but like, who's to say that was going to even happen? It all has to do with like who's taken where. I mean, I don't know. I've never been one. I point totally like valid, but is it really worth dogging them so much for that? It's like, oh, are you implying that they definitely could have had one of those guys? I don't know. At a time
no.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that like clearly that like giving up the amount of assets to the Dolphins that they were able to, that now former 49ers assistant coach Mike McDaniel was able to build into his new team.
Yeah.
That basically they're now, a huge powerhouse in the AFC potentially. And they ended up trading all of that away to get a 4th round pick in return, of which apparently the Cowboys only got him because it took them a while to up their offer into a 4th and no one else offered a 4th. And so the people were only offering, 6s, 5s, and then eventually the 4th that won the deal. So, I mean, we'll see if he can develop, if they can actually give him time to heal and sit behind Dak. But yeah, I mean, it was definitely a really weird situation. I remember at the time being very confused as to why they even drafted him in the first place, because if you look back at the time, there was a huge conversation over, is it going to be Mac or Trey, because they kept doing smoke screens over who was their guy. Trey Lance at the time of that draft hadn't played a football game in 2 years because North Dakota State did not play in 2020. And so the last time he played football was December of 2019. And so I mean, he was off for a really long time, and he just didn't look great when he was there. So there were a lot of question marks for him to be traded, or for him to be drafted that high.
Right.
So we'll see.
I will mention one thing based on what you said, Case, and then I want to circle back to a point Dylan made. The thing is, the thing I've kind of been talking among my spheres over the last few days is kind of like, okay, so can we finally put to bed this whole idea of North Dakota State, amazing quarterback, has incredible season and is going to be a franchise quarterback in the NFL? Like, it was already kind of happening with Carson Wentz, and the writing was on the wall about when that thing happened. But like now, nowadays it's like for sure writing's on the wall. And now it's Trey Lance. It's like, oh, that quarterback's not going to develop into like potentially a franchise guy. Shocker. Who saw that coming? But most people. I don't know. It's like the hype we see artificially built about these guys like a month before the draft, where a lot of it I personally think in more recent years as we've gotten older, just as analysts like us three, it's sort of like it really is just hype building to pull a wool over the eyes of the teams you're against to try and like, oh, we're going to take this guy. Nope. It's all like we have one guy on the board 9 times out of 10, maybe one fallback guy if we really need a quarterback. So anyway, real quick, circling back to, and I'll let you guys respond to whatever I say here. circling back to Dylan's point, I definitely think you're onto something as far as, like, speaking of writing being on the wall. I think Jerry Jones definitely sees the writing on the wall with Dak. It's sort of like, everyone thought we were completely cooked at the beginning of last year when Dak went out for what, like 5 or 6 weeks. You remember they were like on Sunday Night Football and Dak got injured and everyone immediately buried the Cowboys. It's like, okay, another terrible year for the Cowboys incoming. Then Cooper Rush actually played pretty well. And it was like, it's almost like he's getting like the Tony Romo syndrome again of maybe we are just like one QB away from potentially finally winning a playoff game again. I don't know. And if you're him and all it takes is a 4th round pick, I can totally see why they made the trade. I was looking at their QB room. They still have Will Grier on the roster. That is, unless he's part of the cuts at 4. I don't know. But they have 4 quarterbacks, at least as of this second, according to ESPN on their depth chart. Don't know if that probably sticks. I would guess not. But
yeah, I mean, they're going to trim it down to 2. Most NFL teams only carry 2 quarterbacks.
Will Grier has been released. Yeah,
there you go. So there it is. So it's Dak, Cooper, and Trey in that QB room now. So that makes sense. So,
and I mean, I wouldn't be surprised to see Cooper Rush. Are Dallas's rosters final case in, or are they still cutting people?
I believe all rosters are official as of 4 o'clock today.
The deadline was 4.
But we don't know everybody, and that's actually what we're going to talk about later in the show. Any kind of surprising cuts? It's like the last thing we have on the agenda. It's Wednesday. It'll be Wednesday before the listeners hear this show, but it is Tuesday at 4 p.m. It's roughly like 5:20ish right now at the time of recording. So anyway,
yeah, gotcha. So I mean, honestly, it's surprising that they're carrying all 3 quarterbacks with because you make that trade for Trey Lance, you think Cooper Rush is maybe even on the hot seat for being on the roster. So, ultimately, I mean, it's a good gamble for what the Dallas Cowboys are betting on. I mean, a 4th round pick is a 4th round pick. That's usually just draft capital to trade away anyways. Very rarely do you have a team that's willing to hold on to that 4th round pick. We might see that trade hands again for the 49ers to maybe trade up to like a 2nd or a 1st round pick in the next couple of drafts. So in terms of, winners and losers from that perspective, Cowboys, big winners. It's a very low risk trade.
Yeah.
49ers, massive losers for all the reasons Kaysen listed about the draft capital they gave away. I mean, when you give up that much draft capital to get a half season from a quarterback who gets injured, looks like trash when he was on the field, and then traded away for a 4th round pick. I mean, that's a huge L in the books, but also shows how hard it is to get a drafted quarterback right.
Mm-hmm. Like to get a draft pick right, but especially a quarterback, man.
Yeah. I believe that if they hadn't have just lucked into getting Brock Purdy, then they would definitely probably be cleaning house in the front office, because
that's a good point.
Like if they were sitting here with Trey Lance as a bust, Jimmy G, probably just a salary casualty, they'd have no quarterback, and so they would probably definitely have to be blaming that on somebody, and that would fall under the front office.
I got to tell you guys, my last real thought and point was I totally swore that the 49ers were headed towards a year where Brock Purdy was going to be their starter, Trey Lance would remain on the roster, and then God forbid, knock on wood, Brock Purdy would get hurt literally the first down of their offense, first of the season, and Trey Lance would become the new Jimmy G, where it's like, oh no, we need to keep our 3rd stringer because we're not going to have a quarterback here in 3 weeks. So I don't know. I was half expecting something like that to happen. Like, oh no, Trey Lance is the new Jimmy G. Nope, he's on the Cowboys now. So,
I mean, he's going to be the new Jimmy G, but for the Cowboys.
Yeah, for the Cowboys,
pretty much. Yeah,
yeah. But I will say, to you guys and listeners, keep your eyes open. If Dak has I don't want this to happen. If Dak has some sort of bad play or is injured at some point, keep all the eyes in the league are going to be on, okay, who are they putting in to replace him? Who is it? Is it going to be Cooper Rush or is it going to be Trey? We'll see. So, stick a pin in that. But if we're done with that, you guys, I would like the way I kind of set up this lineup, and just for the listeners and everyone here, is I have this set up. I want to go around the 8 divisions and kind of us to kind of pick how they're going to shake out. And my idea for this came from, there's a little bit of backstory here. Dylan and I are in a fairly serious fantasy football league with some friends from college, and we typically kind of get online with each other at the draft. And it was like a week and change ago that we had our draft, but Dylan had some interesting takes as far as how certain divisions were going to shake up, including our own, which I'll go ahead and say, I think we should do the AFC North last, you guys, just because we all have dogs in that fight of how they were going to go. And then I really got to looking around today myself, and I wrote all mine down of, I can see some interesting things going. So I'm interested to see where our opinions differ. Do you guys want to go NFC first and then AFC?
Sure. Sounds good
Sure.
to me.
Yeah,
Okay.
that works.
Let's start in the NFC East. I went east, north. We'll go east, south, west, north, if I even remember that correctly. Well, as long as we end on the AFC North, as long as it ends up that way. So NFC East, anyone can start. Kaysen, why don't you start? And we'll go around sort of like we did our massive massive college football preview. We'll kind of say who's going to win it, and say your order, and say who your potential wild cards could be. And you can even wait till we go through all the divisions if you want to do that.
Okay, yeah, of course. So we're going to start with the NFC East. So for reference, the NFC East is the Washington Commanders, New York Giants, Dallas Cowboys, and the Philadelphia Eagles. Yeah, I mean, I think that as we've seen before, this division is definitely odd at times. There, many years they're absolute garbage. But I think that it'll be very interesting because I think it'll be the Eagles and the Cowboys kind of, fighting out for first place. But I think that definitely, I think the Eagles are going to win the division on that one with the healthy Dak. Cowboys could be, in play for a wild card.
So you're not even considering the Giants then?
It's possible, but there's a lot that would go into it.
I mean, who's your 3 and 4? Would your 3 and 4 be Giants? Commanders?
Yeah, Commanders and 4th. Yeah.
Okay.
So there's a universe where the Giants could also, but I just think that there would be a stronger second wild card out there.
Interesting. Okay.
Because I don't see another wild card coming out of the NFC East.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. I think in terms of competitiveness, the NFC East is probably going to be one of the more competitive inner divisions this year, just because none of the teams are like that insanely good, sans maybe the Eagles. But even they had a little bit of luck to make it to the Super Bowl last year. So, it really, I think the performance of Jalen Hurts is going to drive what the Eagles have this year in terms of offensive capability and just overall staying power within the NFL. But in terms of like overall structures and kind of how the NFC's East ebbs and flows go, they go from the NFC Beast one year to dumpster fire the next year.
To NFC least.
Yeah.
I love that least. The
most. Yes. So, I mean, I agree with Kaysen that Eagles definitely have the best shot to win the division, but a lot of people are really counting out the G-men this year. And if you really look back to last year, Daniel Jones had a resurgence in kind of his quarterbacking career. He played solid, football throughout this season, which led them to be in contention for a wild card towards the end of the season. So, if they're able to build on that, kind of get past this whole Saquon Barkley issue that they had this offseason, then, they're in prime position to, make some noise and maybe even take one of those wild card spots away from a quote unquote better team.
So what's your order, Dylan?
I would have to say Eagles. I'm going to go G-men in second. Cowboys in third, with Dak Prescott getting injured at some point this season and Trey Lance taking over and the team just tanking. And then the Commanders in fourth because it's the Washington Commanders and they're not going to do anything for at least 2 or 3 years until their new ownership rights the ship.
That's very fair.
Yeah,
that's very fair. I mean, and even thinking back, like I said it on the show when we first started, I gave a ton of credit to Brian Daboll for getting Daniel Jones to be a much more efficient and effective passer. So yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely a universe in which he can be a much better quarterback this year.
So I think what I'll do is like as we go around, I'll say what the four are, and then give your reasons, right? So I think that'll be good, because everyone's gonna want to hear kind of like who's your like stack up. So I was kind of between you guys, and the way I ended up doing these divisions, all of them is I did them from the basement up. So I said who the worst team was going to be first, and I wrote that and I penciled that in four on almost all of these. This was one where I did that, and the Commanders were my solid number four. I'm like, okay, yeah, who's up? My order is actually the same as Dylan's. I have Eagles, Giants, Cowboys, Commanders, and I have the Giants, and I actually have the Cowboys missing the playoffs. For the reasons more that Dylan said, in that I think this is the year where the Giants are more poised to take that big step forward with Daboll. And the thing is, I think Daboll's a really solid head coach, and I think he's an amazing motivator. But like he's also good on the technical side. And my thoughts are, I have more faith in the G-men taking a step forward, and the Cowboys, if they stay exactly the same, they'll be worse than the Giants were last year. So
yeah,
that's kind of where I'm at. It was more of like a matter of, there was a few examples in the NFL this year where I'm like, who's the solid number two that will be the wild card? And I was between two teams. It could go the other direction, similar to how it was last year, but especially with the way the Cowboys kind of stumbled their way into the postseason last year and just didn't look cohesive at all down the stretch. Yeah, I got that stack.
And I mean, if we're looking at the NFC overall, obviously we're going to go through the other divisions, but you could definitely see an 8 or 9 win team make the wild card this year, just because of how weak the NFC is compared to the AFC.
Absolutely. Moving on to the NFC South, which for reference is the Atlanta Falcons, New Orleans Saints, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and Carolina Panthers. Kaysen, off you go.
Yeah, so this is definitely, I think, going to be the best of the least type of division. A lot of what we've seen from the NFC least before. But the NFC South it's a bunch of nobodies, really. I mean, to be perfectly honest,
is a bunch of
and so I went with with just the team that has the quarterback that I trust the most, which is the New Orleans Saints. I mean, they have Derek Carr, which Derek Carr is at least solid, and you can trust him at least most of the time. So I think it'll be the Saints will be able to win that out. And then I've got I mean, it's really more of just like who's going to be worse.
Hey, sometimes that's how this goes, man.
I guess I'm gonna go the Atlanta Falcons, and then the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and then the Carolina Panthers in last place.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that sentiment, Kaysen. It's really gonna be, who can be the best of the worst in this division. I also have the Saints winning it solely because of Derek Carr. But that is also to say, we don't know kind of what that head coaching staff is really capable of. They haven't had a true quarterback like they've had in Derek Carr, but Derek Carr is average at best. I mean, he might have 1 or 2 games where he goes off. So it could be very easily, like, say the Atlanta Falcons take a step this season and Ridder is, the quarterback we think he can be, with that power arm. He has the legs, he has the mobility. It's just that decision making that really kind of hindered him last year. So if Ridder, makes that step this year, I could very well see the Falcons take, first place. But with that said, I'm putting them in second. The Buccaneers in third, but they're going to have massive quarterback issues. They have Baker Mayfield as QB number 1, and we all know how that really lasts as Browns fans with Kaysen and myself, and then also just that experiment that we saw in Los Angeles with the Rams, and then Panthers bottom of the barrel by far. I mean, that team is just a hot mess right now.
So I have it. This was a little weird for me. I actually do have the Bucs at the bottom of this one with the Panthers, mainly because I think it's going to be a race to the bottom for those two. Like, those are two of I think going to be the worst teams in the NFL. And maybe it's because of the bias of where I live nowadays, but I'm like, hey, there's a lot of excitement about Bryce Young. If he can have a cohesive, good rookie season with that division being as trash as it is, I can absolutely see the Panthers stealing a few victories from those teams at the bottom. Therefore, I think we all agreed the Falcons would be that. And I think we also had the Falcons at number 2. And I also had the Saints almost by default winning that division. But this is another one of the situations where if there's a drastic turn on your heel kind of performance from someone in the middle there, I can totally see them winning the division. And no one's going to run away with it, but it's going to be like a who can play cohesive enough football to outdo the other trash teams. That's what the NFC South is for me this year. That's what I got.
I think it's entirely possible that we end up seeing the winner of this division have a losing record
and make have that same controversy, which is funny because it's happened with this division before.
It could be like 8-9 versus 7-10. And that'll win the division is 8-9.
If I'm not mistaken, I'm pretty sure that happened like 10 years ago with the NFC South. That's like the same division.
It happened with the Saints.
With the Saints, yeah. So there you go. We'll see what happens there, but no wild cards, I assume, for you guys from this division. No. All right.
I definitely think there is a universe. I said the Bucks in third, but hey, I mean maybe Caleb Williams needs to do apartment shopping in Tampa Bay. So, I don't know.
Maybe or potentially somewhere in this next division, the NFC West. The NFC West here. We're gonna go west and then we'll end it up with the North. NFC West, San Francisco 49ers, Los Angeles Rams, Arizona Cardinals, and the Seattle Seahawks. What's gonna happen in it, guys? Jason, around the way, around the horn like normal here.
I mean, I think it's pretty easy, I think, to say that 49ers are probably the best choice there to win the division. As far as what comes after, I guess, I mean, as much as it's weird, the Seahawks, I mean, Geno had them at least, pretty solid, I think. So
last year was weird. This year's more expected, I think.
Right. The Seahawks, I think, could be in contention for another wild card spot there, second place in the West. And then I have the Rams in third place and the Cardinals in last.
I also have that same exact layout. Barring another injury, we really don't know how Brock Purdy's going to hold up going through a full NFL season after the significant injury he suffered. So if that's the case, I could very well see the Seahawks take over this division because Geno Smith is really Mr. Consistency when it comes to the quarterback position. And we know Pete Carroll is, very much on that same level playing field in terms of mindset, which is why he had such issues with Russell Wilson, especially towards the back half of that tenure together. So be on the lookout, honestly, for the Seahawks. I think they could surprise a lot of teams this year and squeak out a couple wins where maybe they weren't expected to win and either be a surprise wild card or even win the division, depending on what happens with Brock Purdy in San Fran.
I agree. Yeah, I'll tell you what. When I first wrote this down today, guys, I had the Seahawks as the division winners, and then I got to really think about it, and I thought that defense in San Francisco, though, like that's where the edge is going to be, and it might be even by a game. Like this division might come down to the last week of the season. I really think it could be that razor thin. That being said, I think the worst team in the NFL could be in this division, and I wrote them in immediately in my number 4 spot, Arizona Cardinals. Congratulations. That's the other spot that Caleb Williams might want to take a look at property. But LA Rams at number 3, obviously, and my 1 and 2 49ers win the division. Seahawks are there with a solid wild card. Like I think this year, if Mr. Consistency, just kind of taking the points, not trying to totally piggyback off of what you both said, but I don't think this is a situation where the Seahawks are going to come down to the end of the season to know whether or not they're making the playoffs. I can see them trying to find out if they're going to be a wild card or if they have maybe a bye or something like, not maybe a bye, but that would be that. I don't have them being the number 1 contender, but like last year they had to wait for the Lions. It was like between the Lions and Seahawks and all this other stuff. I don't think that's the case for Seattle. I think Seattle's a solid playoff team. So
Yeah, and
we all agree.
you did bring up the Arizona Cardinals, and interesting enough, that trade for Josh Dobbs that they made with the Browns, but they still haven't named a starting quarterback in Arizona,
No.
with Kyler Murray still out. So interesting little situation developing there. I think Kyler Murray obviously on his way out, just injury prone and has not performed well even when he's been in at quarterback. So be on the lookout for the first to worst record with the Cardinals, for that draft capital next year and getting that number 1 overall pick.
And there could be a tremendous esports team that's going to get an amazing Call of Duty player in Kyler Murray here very soon, going pro. And the number one thing anyone ever thought he was definitely going to when he was getting ready for professional sports career.
Is he still on the Athletics? Is he still part of the Athletics?
I have no idea. I
have no idea. I don't know.
That might be worth looking up later just to see if they still technically have. I'm sure they still technically have his, like, however, where his draft rights are part of it, but who knows? But would you want to join the A's?
Pay him money back? I don't know. Oh no.
Yeah, would you want to join an even worse franchise off these days? Anyway, so we're gonna wrap it up.
If the Cards are starting Josh Dobbs, they are racing to the bottom. They're racing to the bottom.
which I'll be honest. Sometimes within a franchise, within an NFL office, it has been my belief. This NFL tinfoil hat fan belief that there's not a single NFL front offices definitely do tank. The coaching staffs don't. The front offices do. I'm fully belief on that. Coaching staffs don't, because no one's going to retain an 0-16 coaching staff. That just doesn't happen. But front offices definitely, I think, subconsciously set their teams up for it. Well, we can just go for the number 1 overall pick, punt this season.
I mean, 1 in 31. That's all I got to say is 1 in 31.
Yeah.
Jeez.
So.
Yeah. So exactly. So last and potentially least, NFC North. That's not fair.
No, I would say this is the most competitive.
This is actually this is actually a really interesting division.
So the NFC North, Green Bay Packers, Detroit Lions, Chicago Bears, and Minnesota Vikings. My order in this one, I've got the Detroit Lions winning the division, in a stunning surprise compared to historical recent results, and then I have the Vikings in second place, with the Bears in third and the Green Bay Packers in last place in the division. I think the Lions, we saw a lot of what they can do. They were really hitting the stride at the end of the season, and I think that they have a lot more assets now, and I think that with some sort of changes in the division, they'll be in a much better position to be able to win. And pretty much the Packers, I think, are going to be absolutely terrible. They had no weapons before, but Aaron could at least make them competitive. And with Aaron gone, I have zero faith in Jordan Love at all. So I think that'll be a disgusting team that will definitely be drafting a quarterback.
I mean, people forget the Minnesota Vikings won 13 games last season. Like, they made no noise in the playoffs, but they won 13 games in the NFL regular season.
With an asterisk.
Where's the asterisk?
13 games they had a negative point differential.
They had negative. They were one of the first teams with 10 plus wins that had a negative point differential. In the NFL.
Which 13 wins though.
Yeah. So, I think, and this is where I'm thinking it's going to be super, super competitive within this division, is because you have Minnesota Vikings with Kirk Cousins still. They won 13 games. Their defense is still very solid. People forget Minnesota's defense, while it doesn't make a ton of noise in terms of coverage or a bunch of people talking about it in the media, they just have a really solid team. So they lost a couple veterans this year to teams like the Browns, but in terms of what they're bringing in, they just kind of churn these guys out over and over and over. With that said, I am taking them in my number 1 spot as the Minnesota Vikings taking the NFC North. A close second being the Detroit Lions. I think they take another step this year, but not a big enough step that people are saying that they're going to win the division. They're a good team. MCDC has them on the right path, but who knows if that's actually really going to be the case overall. Chicago
as you were saying, Dylan.
Yeah, so the Bears, I mean, everything really just hinges on how well they're able to play around Justin Fields. I mean, we know Chicago has the guy with, Fields as quarterback, and he's showed flashes of brilliance last year. So it's about, can he string these games together, perform well? But with that said, I'm still putting them in third in the NFC North, and then Green Bay Packers coming in last because Jordan Love is just such an unknown. He has the arm talent, but is the decision making there? Because if you don't have the decision making, arm talent means nothing in NFL. You have to be able to hit those tight windows, those half-second windows, and get those receivers open, throw them open instead of having them be open and then throwing to them.
I tend to agree with you guys, but I think where we're going to agree, Dylan, and we're going to differ, Kaysen, is I also have the Vikings solidly in first place, primarily because I don't believe it's not that I don't believe yet in the Lions that they're going to take a step forward. It's just that, like, I'm not going to sit here like a lot of folks and say they're going to win the division. It's like, okay, I need to see more from what's going on. First, sorry, getting some things situated from our little technical thing that happened. But anyway, so I do have the Vikings there as number one. This was the only division really where I couldn't easily pencil in like a bottom team. At first, I wanted to pencil in like the Bears, honestly, because of how bad they were last year. But then I was like, no, I'll go the Packers. Packers are going to be the worst team in this division, I think, for the reasons that we said. Like they're the same. They seemingly are the same team, only they're down one Aaron Rodgers, and it's like, okay, well then they're just they suck. That's fine. Bears I think could be a real fun team to watch this year, barring Justin Fields, and they get the production out of the pieces that they really acquired. The Lions, though, I think are a solid wild card team in number two. Like I think they're another one. Like I think if there's two solid wild cards that I really believe in, your three that are going to come from the NFC is second team in the East, the Lions, and then probably the Seahawks. At least the way I kind of laid it out. Could the Vikings in theory take a step back and the Lions win the division? Yes. But kind of a contrary to what you said, Kaysen, it wouldn't superly surprise me. It would kind of say like, oh, okay, so they are this good. It would be a nice, pleasant change of things, especially for, I'm sure, the folks in Michigan. And one friend of this show in particular, a guy who we had as another one of our guests in the past. So, yeah, so that's so ultimately, I guess we'll hold off on like actually picking like our contenders and who's going to the Super Bowl. Switching to the AFC, we will start with which was by far for me the hardest division to pick besides ours, guys, and that's the AFC East. So, Kaysen, you can start. This is the more competitive conference. I mean, in our lives, but kind of historically, more recently, probably the last 30 years or so.
Yeah. So this one definitely was pretty tough. Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm gonna have to just go.
Yeah, it's hard, isn't it? I literally sat about and thought about this for almost 10 solid minutes today.
I'm just going to rip the Band-Aid off and be wrong, whatever. I'm gonna be controversial. I'm gonna go the New York Jets to win the division.
Okay.
And then I'm gonna go in second place the Miami Dolphins.
Oh,
and
wow.
then third place the Buffalo Bills. And so
Spicy
in last
takes.
place the New England Patriots. There's a reason that I wholly believe the Patriots are going to be in the basement of this division easily, for a very obvious reason. And we can talk about that later. But yeah, the Jets. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I just felt like, I guess, being interesting and jumping on the train. And then the Bills, I said it earlier, or I said it last season in the playoffs. I did not like the trajectory the Bills are going on. Josh Allen had his worst season. It's clear he was missing Brian Daboll as his offensive coordinator. Ken Dorsey just ain't it. And as far as the defense goes, they lost Leslie Frazier. So, I mean, I think McDermott's kind of being the DC right now. So I think that defense is going to take a step back. They were missing people as well. I think that they're definitely dealing with a lot of internal things. I've heard I've heard rumblings of Stephon Diggs wanting out again. I mean, I think that as far as a locker room, that locker room has many issues. That if it's a tight race and it's like, 11 games wins the division, and then it's like two teams at 10 games, and it's like comes down to one head-to-head matchup, I think it could be very, very troubling. I think if you were relying on a razor thin margin.
I have a very funny question I want to ask Kaysen, but I got to hear Dylan's response first.
No, go ahead, ask him. I'm curious.
I was gonna ask Kaysen, have you secretly been watching Hard Knocks?
I honestly no, I have not.
Okay, I just feel like all the hype with the Jets is centered around just how I guess good Hard Knocks has been this season. Anyway, continue. Go ahead, Dylan.
Yeah, well, I mean, to that point, Kellen, I mean, we saw the same thing with the Lions last year. Like, everybody was like, after Hard Knocks was like, oh, the Lions are going to be the team this year. Like, they're it. And then they just kind of were like, okay, just we'll keep the boat afloat. But
they were pretty good, but it's really this season. Yeah,
there are plenty of reasons the Jets could be a disaster, but I'm just saying they keep stacking talent like they're Infinity Stones. Like, I mean, you've got Dalvin Cook, you've got Breece Hall, you've got Garrett Wilson, they have so much offensive talent along with Aaron Rodgers. And if Aaron Rodgers is like, is at least as good as he was, last year, they could easily win that division.
Yeah, I'm definitely not taking anything away from that. I mean, the Jets with Aaron Rodgers, this is the best wide receiver core Aaron Rodgers has had since he had Murderers Row with Jordy Nelson, and Adams, right?
Devontae Adams,
Adams, Jordy Nelson, and I'm blanking on their third, but it was just like, I mean, that wide receiver core was one of the best in the NFL when Aaron Rodgers was throwing to him for that 3-year span.
Randall Cobb,
yes.
Yep,
so exactly. I mean, like, this is the best wide receiver core Aaron Rodgers has had since that group. With that said, I mean, I think people are really weirdly down on the Bills this year. And as long as they have the quarterback that is Josh Allen in that offensive line, they're going to win football games. Full stop. It doesn't matter what that defense is, even if it's subpar this year, that offense is going to score points. Like, it's going to turn into more of like what we're used to seeing in the college landscape of offensive shootouts instead of defensive stands. They'll lose a couple games that they probably should win because the defense just isn't there. But you got Josh Allen. So for that sole specific reason, I'm taking the Bills as winning the division this year. I think Jets are number 2 with that addition of Aaron Rodgers. I mean, you just can't discount he's top 3 in the NFL in quarterbacking, even though he's on, the last few years of his career. The Dolphins at number 3, I think they really take a step back. Everything really hinges on Tua Tagovailoa there. They have the talent, they have the offensive speed, the wide receiver core, their tight ends are really good, but their offensive line can't block a paper bag. So Tua's going to be really just scrambling for his life all season. And it's really if he can escape that, get some, junk yards that maybe he shouldn't be getting a couple passes completed that he shouldn't be completing. It's really going to be where the Dolphins make or break their season. And then very much Patriots bottom of the barrel. Mac Jones just isn't it. I don't know why people are saying he is, this is his year. This is where he's going to take a step. There's no talent on that team around him that can send him to that next level or make up for some of his shortcomings. So Patriots and Bill Belichick last in the division this year.
I'll keep that rolling and say, yeah, that was another in my strategy. I penciled number 4 Patriots right in there with my number 4. And before I continue with the rest of my stack, Kaysen, what are your reasons as to why the Patriots are going to be the worst team?
Oh yeah, well, the Patriots cut Bailey Zappi.
Mm-hmm.
So the only quarterback on the roster is Mac Jones, of which, like Dylan said, he ain't it. So I don't know. I don't know what is going on, but until Robert Kraft just mans up and fires Bill Belichick, then they're not going to get better.
Jeez. I mean, I mean, I would go as far as to say Belichick's the only thing keeping them decent now, Jason. I just think that the rest of the division's caught up.
Well, I'm saying they're not going to be bad enough to rebuild, so he's going to keep them at like 5 wins, just because like he's not going to fully tank, and yeah, I mean he's gonna try to field a competitive team, but it's just not going to work.
Well, I agree with that, and I don't care about additions like Zeke, whatever. They're still going to be Patriots. Patriots are still going to be the bottom. We finally hit a point where the Patriots are the basement of their division, and I love it personally. But that being said, I already said what I was going to say. The 3-1 was so hard for me. This was the division that was the most difficult for me, and I actually penciled in my number 2 next wild card, Buffalo Bills. I also doubt what's going on. And even if everything that they've been doing in the regular season continues to go on, as Dylan said, they'll win games. They ain't winning no playoff games with their defense the way it is. If anything, they're regressing in that regard. And I think this is the year that, because of the stuff that Kaysen said off the field and other areas, where the bickering Bills of 2023 becomes a storyline and they regress in the regular season ever so slightly to the actual division winning, and I can't believe I'm saying this, New York Jets. I also had the Jets winning the division. It had really nothing to do with Hard Knocks. It had to do with, I think the Bills are going to take the step back. It has more to do with that than I think that the Jets are going to be that much better. But it was really, really tough for me to pencil the Bills in there at number 2 and think, okay, who am I a bigger believer in going to be better, the Jets or the Dolphins, from 3 to 1? Like, that's kind of how I did this, and I just got to be real with you guys. That's kind of how it ended up. And I'm more of a believer in the moves that the Jets made than I am, and Aaron Rodgers still, being close, hopefully, maybe it's not the top of his game, but still, I'm more of a believer in a guy who's really done it and been there before than all the question marks the Dolphins still have. So that's my reasoning. To go a little bit further into the Bills conversation a little bit, I don't know necessarily if there's going to be any regression on offense. I mean, I think all of the off the field stuff and drama and news we've seen regarding Josh Allen and Diggs, not to mention you've got Madden curses and off the field, non-football drama related to all multiple members of the Bills. I think they will do well enough to obviously make the playoffs. And honestly, this could even be a situation where it all backfires and they do exactly what Dylan said, because everyone thinks they're not going to be good. I'm not saying they're not going to be good. I think they're going to be good. I just think that they're on the way down more than they think.
I won't disagree with that. I think
we could be the dumb ones here, Dylan. You could easily be like, now Josh Allen's going to have the greatest season of his career and just make everyone shut up. It's like, all right. Well.
I think they get bounced in the first round of the playoffs. Like I very much wholeheartedly agree with that statement of like their defense won't be able to carry them.
The Dolphins should have beaten them last year at home in that first game. And
that's also to say, like, the Dolphins only won. I looked back at the 2022 season. The Dolphins only won 1 game since December 4th. So they finished the back half of the season like 1-8, 1-7, somewhere in there, and then like kind of scraped into the wild card spot for the AFC last year. Now, your point still very much stands for the postseason side of things, and them barely losing to the Bills, and probably shouldn't have lost to the Bills. But I mean, if you're going to go off of trend lines, and me being the analytical mind that I am, sometimes to a fault, I really think that the Dolphins just regress even further this year.
If there's a sabermetrics friend of the show expert we have, it's definitely you, Dylan. Literally. What were you gonna say, Kaysen? And then we'll move on to the other
I would just add I could definitely probably swap the Bills and the Dolphins to match what you had, Kellen, but I just wanted to prove my point that the Bills concern me wholeheartedly. I really think though that Tua is going to get injured and the Dolphins are going to suck and they'll collapse down the stretch. But
I will go ahead and say that I had a Bills fan say to me not long ago, like in the last month, that this person thinks that the Bills will not win a Super Bowl with Josh Allen there through no fault of Josh Allen's. And I'm like, yeah, totally true.
That I think sounds very agreeable.
That's pretty much what's been going on so far. I mean, I personally, that's a fan base I genuinely like, and you guys know my kinship with upstate New York, literally over my shoulder here. I mean, it's a place I love a lot, and a place that deserves a winning team like that. Just don't see all the evidence there yet.
There was a big conversation over, you know, it over how much of a Super Bowl window does Buffalo have. I mean, and a definitely a thought for that conversation would be, I don't think it's open anymore. I think it closed.
Yeah, so you said I won't go that far. I think you said that in another episode, Case, and it's still very much open. Like
I mean, it's just once you pay the big contract,
well,
and then you start losing people, and I mean,
you lose.
But
you lose coaches.
Is that really a thing anymore because of how much teams have learned about how to restructure deals and build that cap space back in? I mean, like they're cheating the system.
Yeah, I'd say yes to both, but you have to utilize those. Let's move on because we want to get to those contender conversations, and we have a division here that I don't think is going to take us too long. AFC South, which is Jacksonville Jaguars, Tennessee Titans, Houston Texans, and the Indianapolis Colts. Kason.
Yeah, interestingly enough, that is actually my order. I have the Jacksonville Jaguars winning the division, and then the Tennessee Titans in second, the Houston Texans in third, and the Indianapolis Colts in fourth. Just to go off quick, I mean, the Jaguars, we saw them win a playoff game, kind of probably when they shouldn't have come back from that deficit against the Chargers, but they still won a playoff game. I mean, and Trevor looked like he had, you know, drastically improved following the Urban Meyer experiment his rookie year. And so Doug Peterson, Super Bowl winning head coach, great coach that clearly has gotten his guys up and very much improved. And then the Titans, yeah, I mean, it's just more of a like the Titans will be the least bad out of the remaining three in that division. I still think they're probably going to be well away from the playoffs, but they'll be, you know, better between the Texans and Colts. And then I just have the Colts in last in the division because seems like they're starting Anthony Richardson, and that is going to be a terrible, terrible situation to be in for them. So yeah, we'll see how that goes, but it's going to be pretty much probably a lot like the NFC South, where it's just going to be one team that kind of knows how to play football and three teams that don't.
Ladies and gentlemen, we may or may not have another 0-16 season on our hands.
17.
They're 17 now. Yes, sorry.
The first 0-17.
The first 0-17.
But who's it going to be?
Third over. The Indianapolis Colts are setting themselves up for a big old bruising going into this season. I mean, the writing is on the wall in terms of how they're setting up this team and what is going on with the Jonathan Taylor situation. You know, where are they going? They don't even know. So they're bottom of the barrel. Houston Texans in a very close third place for the bottom of the barrel. I think it's going to end up being like Colts either win no games or win like maybe one or two, and the Texans win 2 or 3. I really think that's going to be the differentiation between the two. CJ Stroud, interesting quarterback, interesting situation. They might have something there, but we know how rookie quarterbacks tend to fare in their first season in the NFL. So it's going to be about, can he show flashes? Can he be kind of like following the footsteps of another Ohio State quarterback in Justin Fields? I think if he takes that blueprint, he'll have a little bit more success. But that being said, he's still going to get torn apart this first season because the Texans are notoriously hapless as an organization. Third or second, I'm going to go with the Jacksonville Jaguars. While I think they're the better overall team, I think that there's just something about the Titans. They're very consistent year over year for the last, 3 or 4 years. Mike Vrabel has that team always on a tear, especially on the defense. That dude, will get them to run through 4 brick walls if, he asks them to. So that's where it's like, I think it's a little controversial in terms of, because they don't really have a mainstay quarterback, but they have everybody else around them that can be consistent enough to win themselves football games. That being said, Jacksonville could very easily, be the number 1 team this year in the South. It'll be a 1 or 2 win margin between those two in my summations.
Yep. Well, I guess I'm the tiebreaker here. I penciled in the Colts immediately at number 4. There's your, one for this go around. I didn't realize. I mean, I didn't. 0-17 would be quite a lot. I mean, even with the new kid, Anthony Richardson,
Yep.
I really think the difference between them and the Texans is going to be between him and CJ Stroud, who has a better year / the other positions if whoever takes a step forward. So that's my number 3. My number 2 is the Titans, and my number 1 division winner is the Jags. I really think the Jaguars could be that team to step forward this season. They've the big thing being the last 2 years, the Jacksonville Jaguars, even during the Urban year 2 years ago, end the season very well. Like they really hit their stride like weeks 15, 16, like 14 on. The Jacksonville Jaguars just become very, very good. I don't know if that's a Trevor Lawrence thing. Yeah, what's up, Kason?
Well, I was just going to say one more thing to add. They get Calvin Ridley back this year.
Oh, okay, so there you go.
They traded like nothing for Calvin Ridley just because he was suspended for last season. So now he comes in this year as their number 1 receiver.
That's right. So I definitely think they're a year better. I don't know. The weird thing about the Titans is the Titans always seem to kind of fall apart down the stretch, and it just kind of becomes Derrick Henry with everybody. I don't know. And the people who blame it squarely on Tannehill, I don't think that's fair either. There are times when facets of that team haven't looked anywhere near matching the energy of their head coach. So that's why I have matching what Kaysen has. But I will say, because we haven't really talked about this yet, because we haven't gotten to the North yet. I think you could see a wild card from this spot. So Titans could be your solid wild card there. So that's what I got. AFC West, before we get to the behemoth. Casey, go for it.
Yeah. So
with the Super Bowl champ winning,
yep.
I'll just go ahead and say, yep, you got the Super Bowl champion, Kansas City Chiefs, the Denver Broncos, Las Vegas Raiders, and the LA Chargers.
Yeah, I have to everybody's surprise, not really, the Kansas City Chiefs winning this division like they have for the last several years. And then followed by the Los Angeles Chargers in second place, the Las Vegas Raiders in third, and in fourth, the Denver Broncos. I think that's how it shook out last year. Yeah, I'll just, the Chiefs are going to be the Chiefs. I don't see anybody threatening that anytime soon. The Chargers, I feel like it's going to be pretty much a similar situation that we had last year, where it's just the Chargers are still the Chargers, but not good enough to beat the Chiefs. And then the Broncos in last place. I'm really going to, I like Sean Payton, as a coach, obviously, but there is a lot of work to do in that locker room and a lot of things that need to be addressed with Danger Russ and getting Russell to be back to what he was, in his peak in Seattle. And until I can see that, I don't have much confidence in that team.
I think that's a very fair statement. But I also think this is one of the sneaky competitive divisions this year. Not for the Chiefs, just because the Chiefs are the Chiefs and they're this generation's Patriots in terms of mainstay in the NFL playoffs, and then also Super Bowl contenders every single year. But I think with Sean Payton as head coach, Russell Wilson is going to get a lot more out of the offense this year. We saw the work that he did with Drew Brees, where you have to expect that the Broncos, Sean Payton brings that to the Broncos this season. So, with that said, I still also have them in the fourth spot in this division, but it's, from top to bottom, it might be 3 or 4 wins, maximum in terms of who's first and who's last in this division. I don't think there's reason to believe that none of these teams go under 500 this season. If Sean Payton's able to get the most out of Russell Wilson. The Raiders also a very, very interesting case. They could easily be slotted into the fourth spot. I have them at third in this division. The Chargers in second, and then the Chiefs in first by, a large margin in terms of who they are as a team, but maybe not as much as in the win column per se.
This was the only division where I immediately penciled in number 1 first instead of 4, and that was the Kansas City Chiefs, obviously. I kind of had a little bit of a harder time with this, but it really came down to this. The Chargers are a weird situation. They seem to be a solid regular season team, and then they also seemingly fall apart in the playoffs. I have them at my number 2, Broncos at 3, and Raiders at 4. I think I'm like I've seen some people say that the Broncos are going to be like solidly the number 2 team, and it's like a race for second place. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Like all of the issue, like I get it with Sean Payton, but with all of the issues that the Broncos had internally last year too, just the weird structure of the team and how much power they gave Russell Wilson on the way in, like that whole office story and everything. I'm not a believer in that they're going to take as big a step forward for the guy who in lieu of the guy who got paid this offseason in Justin Herbert. So I'll go with that as my lineup. And I honestly could see this as a situation where no team other than the Chiefs makes it to the playoffs from this division, even if one of them has a good record, because of because of the division we're about to talk about. But go ahead, Dylan.
I think that's, it's going to be interesting. I really do think that the West probably is a 2 playoff division as it stands. The big question mark, honestly, is Jimmy G and the Raiders. Everybody's talking about Sean Payton and Russell Wilson, but is Jimmy G going to be kind of like that old Jimmy G where he's able to, put together those last second drives and win? Or is he going to be more of like the 49ers Jimmy G where he plays well for a couple of games and then just completely collapses?
Yeah. The autumn wind is a Raider is what Dylan could be saying. So here we are at the AFC North. This is our division. We got 2 Browns fans. I'm a Steelers fan. Dylan made a statement that I won't. I'll let him make himself in a bit, but this is going to be an interesting year, maybe one of the more interesting years for the AFC North since we've been alive. Take it away, Kaysen.
Yeah, I will go ahead and start from the basement and work up from there. Yeah, again, this was a tough one as well because I think it'll be really competitive. I mean, there's 4 really, really solid teams in this division. But I'm going to go ahead and go with the Baltimore Ravens in 4th place.
Okay.
I mean, just from the fact of, I mean, there's been lots of issues. We saw the turmoil with Lamar and his contract situation and all that stuff, and I don't think that just goes away. And so I think there's a huge gap between the coaching staff, the front office, and Lamar and the rest of the team on that one. And then in 3rd place, I'm gonna have to go Pittsburgh Steelers in 3rd place. It's a very now granted, again, much like the West, this is probably like a 3 to 4 win margin from top to bottom here. It's a very close division. So it's just going to come down to head matchups.
Yeah, continue. Yeah.
And it just comes out. I mean, there's talent everywhere. It's just I'm going to have to see a lot more from Kenny Pickett to have much confidence in picking them higher than that. And then in 2nd place, I'm going to go the Cleveland Browns. I think we'll definitely be better this year with a full year of Deshaun. I mean, he's looked better than he did last year in the preseason. So we'll see how that goes. But hopefully he can return to form and be the Pro Bowl caliber quarterback that we traded for and paid $50 million a year for.
Oh, you're paying for way more than that.
Well, that too. And then in 1st place, obviously, you have Joe Burrow and the Cincinnati Bengals. I mean, it's just sort of without any evidence to the contrary, much like the West. It's just like I mean, they're probably the best team top to bottom, especially in the offensive side. So, yeah.
All right.
The AFC North, the most competitive division in the NFL this year. I think every single team is above 500 to end the season. But that is to say, there's not going to be a team from the AFC North that has the best record in the AFC this year. They're going to beat the ever living crap out of each other when it comes to the divisional games.
Yeah.
So, that means, first to fourth is going to be 3 games, 4 games max, in terms of who's your last place in the division to who's your first place. With that said, Kellen, you're going to hate me even worse because I have to put the Steelers in fourth for that same reason, Kellen, or for that same reason Kaysen just said. Of Kenny Pickett is still such a huge unknown in terms of the quarterback position for the Steelers. We know Mike Tomlin is Mr. Consistency. He will get them to a 500 record, but it's really contingent on, does Kenny Pickett take that next step? Is he kind of more of that Big Ben-esque leader in the clubhouse? Will he be able to get the ball to his wide receivers? We got Pickett to Pickens, or Pickens to Pickett.
No, it's Pickett to Pickens. No, you had it right the first time.
Pickett, yeah, Pickett to Pickens this season. So that's going to be said a lot. I mean, those two have a connection. It was very apparent last year, showed up again in the preseason this year. You can only expect that to continue on. But they don't really have a true number one running back to also rely upon. So, you have to take the good with the bad when it comes to this offense, and what people are going to be keying in on when it comes to defensive structures moving forward. That's why I have them in fourth, but it's a very close fourth, because in third is interchangeable with second, I think is going to be the Baltimore Ravens. It's going to be 1 win at most between first and second within this division. Lamar Jackson, just huge issues. I mean, they have the old man's club in terms of receivers this year. They have OBJ, which is like their number one. Everybody's, creating a lot of hoopla around this, but he hasn't really been the OBJ from when he was in New York, ever since he had left. He had those flashes with the Rams, but still wasn't really utilized to his full potential. And he's only getting older and older. His routes are going to become less crisp. He's not going to be able to really catch the ball the way he used to.
He's also coming back from another ACL.
Yeah, very injury prone. And Lamar Jackson can't hit the broadside of a barn when he's throwing the football. Nope. This has been well documented. So that's why I have them in third. I have the Browns very, very tentatively in second. It really is dependent on Deshaun Watson. They have the team this year. They have, a top 10 defense. They have a top 10 offense in terms of the talent. But they're only going to go as far as Deshaun Watson is able to carry them. So if he's a lame goose, they could end up in fourth, and, somebody else is going to take second and third out of it. That's, how volatile the situation is in Cleveland this year, and being very realistic, I hope for the best as a Browns fan, but I also see the writing on the wall of it really is Deshaun Watson's year of proving, hey, we'll make it to the playoffs. We might be a Super Bowl contender, or, oh, I come out in the first 4 weeks, we get just absolutely shellacked and the season's over before it even began. I could see it going either way, really. That's just how volatile this Cleveland Browns team is this year. And then Joe Burr in the Bengals, number one. I just, they're Super Bowl contenders the last couple of years, and I don't see anything really changing this year. They've only added more and more weapons in terms of their defense. That's always been kind of the weaker side of the ball for them. And then just continuing to try to improve that offensive line to protect Joe Burrow.
God. All right. That was a lot of stuff you guys both said. I actually do agree with kind of both your points. This was another situation where I wrote a team down immediately, and that was the Bengals in number one. I think we can all agree on that. 3 through 4, I'll tell you what, I could not agree with Dylan Moore in that this could truly be like someone's got to finish fourth, but we really could have everyone with worst team as a 500 record. And that right there is actually where, if that's what the Steelers are signed up for again this year, I could easily see them in number 4. That being said, my number 4th team is the Ravens for the reasons that Kaysen said. My big thing is their offense is not going to be as good as Baltimore fans are probably touting. And have you ever noticed that their defense is awful? I've never quite really compartmentalize this idea of like the last time, the time that the Ravens have been like really fantastic. They have a serviceable 3-4, but they don't have any like real like home wreckers, so to speak, on defense that are ever consistent enough. And which is why I'm consistently watching the Steelers go right down the field with our horrendous offense last year against them. And I'm like, well, how are like you making us look good on offense? Because we're not, especially with Matt Canada as the OC. Anyway,
I believe their defensive playbook for the secondary is just hold and pass interference the entire game.
I mean, just the way that I'm like they like at times just don't drop into coverage. I'm like, I'm fine with this if the Ravens just don't know how to play zone defense, but whatever. I mean, it's amazing to me that people think like, oh, the Ravens are gonna be a contender. No, they're not. Between Lamar fumbling it every time he gets sacked to throwing it against nothing to OBJ going to be hurt week 2, the Ravens are not going to be good. So that being firmly a number 4, here's where I had us like, I'm going to give the nod to the Steelers at 2 and the Browns at 3, simply because, as Dylan pointed out to me, and Kasten, really, both of you have pointed out to me before, the Browns have the Bengals number like the Steelers have the Ravens number. That is like consistent. Like, the Browns are always going to play the Bengals really tough. The thing I love about the AFC North that I think all three of us can agree on is no one's intimidated by anyone. I mean, there's long-standing history, but there's mutual respect. But like, the three of us are not sitting here cowering in fear of the Bengals anytime soon. If they won back-to-back Super Bowls, I'd be like, okay, well, they're the new Chiefs. But that hasn't happened yet. I still look at them as they're beatable. Yeah, Joe Burrow's good. Yeah. Are they the best team in the division? Yeah. Can we beat them? Yes. And all three of us should say that about our team. And so until that changes, until that shifts, basically until the AFC North's not how it usually is anymore, I'm going to continue to believe that. But that's my list, and I really give the edge to Cleveland because of that defense and the consistency and just how hard it is to move the ball. I definitely think the Browns and Steelers split this year again. Honestly, I think all of us split with each other. The Bengals are definitely going to get the most division wins. And I to counter your points about the Steelers, I think the defense is going to be solid. It's going to come down to injuries on defense. I mean, if TJ Watt stays healthy, we're going to have one of the top defenses in the league like we do. If he goes injured, we're not going to win games. That apparently is just how it has gone. I mean, if you look at his record without it. Kenny Pickett is the big question mark. I totally agree with you guys. But beyond that, I think what frustrates me the most about the Steelers is that the front office that would really seemingly now is really going through Tomlin, though Omar Khan, I think, is about to prove himself as an incredible GM. It's just as moves are made. I think that it's a scoring league now, and the Steelers still have this mentality of if we go defense first and we score 30 points, we should win a game. I'm like, we should win every week. It's like, guys, you need to score like 45 points, okay, to really ensure the victory. So I don't think that's going to – I think the way the Steelers are built right now is not going to make us contenders, maybe not anytime soon, but not this year. But if a year like Dylan described where we're in the basement of the division for that reason is going to cause real change, and I think Omar Khan, the new GM, is the guy to do that. That's my rebuttal to what you guys said. It's going to be a lot of fun. The AFC North is the best and worst thing about all of our fandoms. I think all three of us would agree on that. I guess my question for you guys is, like, you guys both kind of had this idea that this is kind of a yet another kind of make it or break it year for the Browns. Like, if you guys are contenders or make the playoffs, it's like, okay, we got a solid nucleus. If we don't make the playoffs, blow it all up again. Like, is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think Kevin Stefanski's on the hot seat this year. They've had two subpar seasons since they made the playoffs and beat the Steelers back in the COVID season of 2020,
which looks like a fluke now.
Yeah,
at least now.
So Stefanski is kind of on that lukewarm hot. Like it's getting pretty hot.
Granted, you had the Baker Mayfield injury season there for 21, and then the year we didn't have Deshaun until the end of the season 22, but they have looked significantly worse than they should have been, and the coaching looked bad. They penalties all over the place. They should have been coached up much better than they were, and so that's going to need to improve for sure.
So yeah, so there you have it. I do think we should shift to give our don't pick the conference champions and who's your Super Bowl champion. At this point, we're about 2 weeks away from the season starting. Kason, you can start. I this is going to be an interesting. This is really going to be interesting. I don't know if we're all going to really agree here.
Oh boy. Oh boy. Okay, if you force me to make a decision here, I've got the four teams in the conference championship games. I've got the Kansas City Chiefs in the AFC championship game against the New York Jets.
Okay.
And then in the NFC championship game, I have the San Francisco 49ers going up against the Philadelphia Eagles in a rematch of last year's game. And I believe in a universe in which you don't have basically them running the triple option, I guess, against the Eagles. I think the 49ers win that rematch of that championship game. And then I think the Chiefs win that AFC championship game to be a rematch of the Super Bowl we had a couple years ago with Kansas City and the 49ers. And in this one, I have the 49ers winning the Super Bowl.
Okay.
All right.
I didn't expect to be picking all four teams. So Dylan, you can do that or not.
Honestly, I don't see a lot of flawed logic, especially with the NFC side case in. It makes the most sense to pick the Eagles and the Niners just because those are the strongest two teams out of the NFC. With that said, I'm going to throw a nice little curveball and say that it is the Philadelphia Eagles and the Minnesota Vikings in the NFC Championship this year. I think it's going to be one of those random years where Kirk Cousins just kind of like goes off. He's going to be the you like that Kirk Cousins in the playoffs. So that being said, I still think the Eagles make it back to the Super Bowl this year from the NFC side of things. And then on the AFC side, Kansas City Chiefs, I mean, you can just basically pencil them into the conference championship right now. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. They're the New England Patriots of this generation, like I said earlier. Out of the other side of it, though, I mean, a lot of people are going to say the Bengals or the Bills. I'm not going to. This is one of those years where I think maybe like the Jacksonville Jaguars get a random, ride on the back of Doug Peterson, get hot right at the end like they tend to do, and then just ride that all the way to the conference championship where they just get beat down by the Chiefs. So we're going to have a, little rematch of last year's Super Bowl, I believe, with the Philadelphia Eagles versus the Kansas City Chiefs.
And who do you the Chiefs winning it again?
Chiefs winning it again.
See, it's so tough because I really think I don't like there's a large part of me that doesn't think the Chiefs are going to make it to the Super Bowl this year, mainly because and if they do make it, it'll be a year where they lose it because it's so hard to repeat. And like, I think the Chiefs will be in the AFC Championship game for as long as Mahomes is like the quarterback for like the foreseeable next, like it at Patriots-esque, like you said, Dylan. That said, it's so tough. I am going to pick the NFC first. I will agree with you, Dylan, and I will go Eagles, Vikings, just to kind of switch it up. In a crazy world, I could see maybe Lions making a playoff run if they really figure it out down the stretch. So I'll give them kind of the honorable mention there. I picked them to essentially be a playoff team. I could also see the Seahawks making a run down the stretch there and eliminating they make it in and they eliminate the 49ers. But just to kind of be different, I'll keep that. And I'll also have the Eagles going back in, barring Jalen Hurts plays like he did last year. Over here, I'll go ahead and say the Chiefs as well in the AFC Championship game. Who's going to play them? I mean, I don't know. I mean,
roll some dice. Like that's.
I mean,
that's
I really like Kaysen. I really like Kaysen's Jets pick, and my thoughts are if I'm going to go ahead and pick them, that or the Bills go on a warpath before they amazingly lose to the Chiefs again, in just an atrocious, horrible game that just makes everyone in Buffalo cry again. As much as it would be nice to see the streets run orange with wing sauce, that would be great. But I'm gonna go Jets Chiefs, and why not? I mean, this is stupid, but yeah, rematch. Only this time the Eagles win. I just have this feeling that it's gonna be like 2 years ago where it was the Rams and the Bengals. You know what I mean?
Like one of those random years where it's like the Chiefs take a collapse in like the second round.
Yeah, like it's the 49ers and maybe the Bengals make it back again. And we get like which I'm pretty sure was a Super Bowl at one point.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I will stay to what I said and say maybe a rematch of last year, but like obviously it's easy to say that right now. You know what I mean? If we have this conversation middle of the season, which I'm sure, we will again, maybe in the same semblance of guys and talent, we'll have more to say then. But it's easy to say the same two teams are going back at the beginning of the season. So I just don't want to say the Chiefs. Go ahead.
I mean, I really think that the AFC, you can roll the dice and whatever it comes up has a good chance of winning the Super Bowl this year. I mean, that's just how strong the AFC is. When you're picking your, division winners plus your even the wild card teams have a solid chance at making it to the Super Bowl. NFC, I think, is where it's just a lot more clear cut, and you have your cream of the crop, and then everybody else.
Yeah. Last thing I have is any surprises, any cuts, things we want to talk about before we kind of hit our wrap up here in our massive preview.
Yeah. I mean, I was just gonna say that there's a weird I guess cut day or two days of cut day with special teams. I mean, you had the Browns cut Cade York, who they spent a 4th round pick on 2 drafts ago. And then there was Will Lutz, the longtime kicker for the Saints. Sean Payton brought him into Denver. So we'll see how that goes. But, I mean, going from kicking into a dome to kicking in Mile High is a bit of a difference.
Thinner air, at least. Ball goes further.
I guess for me, my big surprise today was that by far the worst lineman on the Steelers these last few years, at least among the starters, Kendrick Green amazingly was traded. He was traded outright to some. I literally didn't even see, but everyone is just talking about. I literally saw that scene from Wolf of Wall Street where he's selling the penny stocks and he's just doing an incredible job of it. It's like Omar Khan on the phone about Kendrick Green. I was like, wow, someone actually took him. It's sort of it's like the Pens trading our oldest guys and getting really good stuff in return and somehow ending with Eric Carlson. So anyway, I don't know. That's the Steelers for you. But that's
I think some of the biggest news out of this cut day or this deadline for what's been going on for about the last week or so is the sheer number of player for player trades and at relatively significant positions that have happened this year. Kaysen made comment of us cutting our kicker in Cade York, but that was due to a trade to get the Chargers kicker. And then trading away Josh Dobbs to the Cardinals, and then cutting another former Browns quarterback. Why am I played for the Texans?
There's a lot of them.
Colt McCoy. That's the
Colt
name
McCoy.
I was looking for. So they cut Colt McCoy to bring in Josh Dobbs. So there's been big cuts like that, or weird random cuts that have kind of in the trades have made this, last week or so very odd in terms of NFL news, something we haven't really seen before. And I really think that's because we're cutting our rosters down from 90 straight to 53. There isn't any sort of gradual movement anymore. It's just straight, you're done.
You got to rip the Band-Aid off.
Yeah.
I got to get this done, man. Steelers traded offensive lineman Kendrick Green to the Texans for a 2025 6th rounder.
Ooh.
So I was like,
pennies.
I'm like, just that's one of those punt him into the sun. We just want him off the roster kind of situation.
It is the Texans.
Yeah, and it's the Texans too. I was like, of course. I don't know. But I agree, Dylan. It is it's fascinating. I was talking to someone today where it's you kind of wish one of these spring leagues would make it so that so many careers didn't have to end outright, as fans of schools where guys don't always necessarily make it long term in the league, it is something to hopefully have happen at some point. But that's it. That's our massive NFL preview. Please, listeners, let us know what your takes are out there. I mean, I know, Dylan, you've got some people who are going to listen to / watch this, so I'll be interested to as always, even back in the Sports Corner days, which was our sports radio talk show in college, I always heard from people whether I wanted to or not whenever we talked about especially the NFL. But Kaysen, you want to wrap us up with talk it? Like, do you want to really put a word in about this thing that we different circumstances we will talk about, but Ahsoka premiered, and I'm pretty sure, Kaysen, you're the only one of the three of us that's seen it so far. I have not yet. I will. Dylan, I didn't.
Yeah.
I assume you didn't. So I'm just making.
Yeah, no, I have not seen it yet.
So
yeah, I mean, I'll spare any details, but I mean, like we talked last week, there are my concern coming in was that it's going to sort of, I think, kind of make people want to stay away, because it's almost like you need so much source material to understand what's going on. And, you know, because Ahsoka's not a character you've ever seen in the movies. And so because you kind of knew that she was from the Clone Wars, that you thought you probably had to go see the Clone Wars and stuff. So after the first two episodes came out, never seeing it, I'll just sort of leave it at generalities of I'm very intrigued with the show.
Okay.
I thought it's going well. I mean, I'll keep my thoughts pretty simplistic at that. I like it so far. And as far as, do you need to see everything? No, at least not right now. It might be helpful to sort of find some sort of recap to at least know who these people are. Because, I mean, they kind of explain who the relationships are to each other. But if you want some sort of pre-existing knowledge of at least who the people are, you can easily find some recaps on YouTube to check it out. But as far as my general summary so far of my thoughts, I think it's very interesting. I'm excited to see the rest of them, and I hope that the quality maintains. But yeah, lots. I mean, there's lots of Easter eggs for those who have seen the source material and know the source material. But good show so far. I'll just leave it at that.
Love the sound of that, and I know there's going to be some recap videos in Dylan's future for sure. When like Loki season 2 rolls around.
Yeah, I'm a little behind on the pop culture, but I am happy that they are giving Ashoka kind of like her mainstay, or like her time to shine, because she is such an underrated character when it comes to the Clone Wars, in the animated series with that. So, you know, it's nice to see that we get the continuation of that story finally.
Yeah, and I said to Case, and I think last week, I'm happy for Dave Filoni in general. You know, like 10 years ago, he probably didn't think like this was really possible, but you always kind of hold out hope of saying, you know, telling more of a character story. I wanted to shift gears and just let the public know that staying in pop culture, but also sport centric, I did just want to put something on blast, and that is Swamp Kings on Netflix. Wow. I did watch it. If anyone else watched it, don't. And from the sound of my voice, I literally have been saying to people around work, it is, do not waste your time. They touted it up like it was going to be the U, but for those Urban Meyer Florida Gators teams, and it is not that. If anything, it is a Urban Meyer puff piece / glossing over the stuff you really want to know. And I went as far as to say it was so disappointing that I almost wish someone else takes the reins and says, no, let's actually talk to Percy Harvin, get all the people who weren't in it, of which was a staggering amount of people were not in it, and tell this correctly and just focus on the off-field stuff.
I would love to see a Fyre Fest type of situation, like a dueling documentary over that. Like, I don't know if you guys remember, but there was a couple years ago, there was a Hulu and a Netflix documentary over Fyre Fest that dropped like the same week, and they told like different sides of the story.
Yeah.
But yeah,
honestly, I mean, we could see that happen. That's the way documentaries are going. I don't know if you guys watched the American Gladiators 30 for 30 or
not
Netflix
yet, but
documentary.
I know, but it's like the same thing, isn't it? It's like dueling.
Yeah,
docs.
they dropped both docs. The 30 for 30, in my opinion, is 100 times better. Just well produced and kind of, you know, gives a more clear story of American Gladiators. But I could very well see that happening, you know, especially with that Florida Gators team. I mean, you had the whole gambit.
I mean,
of personalities there. So
I almost want the same. I forget his name. Billy something. I forget his name. The director of both of the U documentaries also directed Broke, and we mentioned that last week, Kaysen, on the show. I want him almost to say, you know what? I'm a Florida native. Let me take a crack at this and do it. And And it was always, the last point I'll make is it was very interesting to me to see very differing opinions from Florida alumni about it. Like there were Florida alumni who hated it, and there were Florida alumni who were like, yeah, it was fun to just relive the glory years, you know? And I understand both points. But like more of the people who didn't like it who were Florida alumni, those people were like way more verbal. They were like, look, as an alumnus, I would rather the public know the whole story, because as an alumnus who went to school then, I want to know the more. So I don't know.
Yeah, I feel like you got more of an inside look at that Florida team just from that Aaron Hernandez Netflix documentary.
Yeah,
that like they talked a lot about him and the Pouncies and the just specific stuff that happened with him in particular in Florida,
and just Gainesville in general. Yeah,
yeah.
So I don't know,
but I feel like it might be a theme with the Untold stuff because right before that the Swamp Kings came out, there was the Johnny Manziel documentary that. Yeah, I mean, I think Dylan can agree with me. That was a little disgusting to watch, but
I watched that one.
Yeah. But it was definitely like okay, like with okay, like cool.
Right.
I mean,
right. It's like there wasn't even any kind of, and not to dog on him as well, but there wasn't even kind of any real resolution. Like you can almost go as far as to say, can you even call them documentaries? You're supposed to tell me the story, not give me a highlight reel. Like I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really just it's the Last Dance effect.
Yes, I agree
on sports documentaries. Because I mean that was fully a puff piece for Michael Jordan. Granted, like the whole series was fantastic. I still loved it. I loved watching every second of it.
But I think you're totally spot on, Dylan. If you watch The Last Dance and you disagree that's a Michael Jordan puff piece, you're wrong. It was. I mean, it can be both. You know. That's such a good point.
Yeah, I mean, at least with that though, I liked seeing the inside stuff from the other people or that were involved, like the Isaiah Thomas stuff and the Rodman stuff. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely like Jordan got final cut for Swamp Kings, Urban got final cut for this show, for the thing. So it's just kind of like, what is the point?
And I didn't want to interrupt you, Dylan. I don't know if you had another point you were going to say.
No, you're good. Yeah, it's just the Johnny Manziel documentary, no new information outside of the fact that like nobody actually knew that he wasn't an oil mogul. Like that was like the biggest like piece of news, and looking back on it, it makes a ton of sense.
I'm going to chuckle.
I don't know if that was new information, but I want his former agent that got him to pass the drug test at the combine arrested and for fraud because he defrauded the Cleveland Browns. He defrauded the National Football League. I want him in jail.
Okay.
Because if he would have failed that test, the Browns would have never drafted him and we would have avoided this entire situation.
All right, pull it all the way back, Kason. On that same note, I want that guy in the Hall of Fame of sports agents because he pulled off the impossible. I mean, really, that whole section about that, him just getting him to the draft, and the fact that he went where he went in the draft is actually kind of miraculous. That
he was like begging teams to take him.
Yeah. And he went 16th overall. I mean, I can't. I for the same reasons that maybe he should be arrested, he also should be in the Hall of Fame. But anyway, the one thing I got to crack up about, and then we can roll out of here is it's like people acting like Twitter the night that dropped, acting like it's shocking. Oh, one of the things we learned that Johnny Manziel never watched any film, not a single second of film in the NFL. I'm like, dude, everyone knew that. Like, are you kidding me? Literally not a soul. Is this news to you? Because not a soul in the NFL who's a fan or executive thought at any point that he was doing anything to get better. Like, come on. So who are you kidding? So anyway, yeah, these documentaries, I think my takeaway that I just wanted to put out this week as we go into this next new season where more content will be coming in. On that same note, I thought Quarterback was really good on Netflix. I would rather see more stuff like that and docudrama stuff like that. And I think I told you both this at separate occasions, Dylan, you as well. That I think when that's done really well, someone even told me like Quarterback was so good that my mom even said, I'd love to see one of these for each position. Like I'd love to see wide receiver. I'd love to see running back. I'd love, stuff like that. I'm like, not a bad idea. Probably something that's being looked into, but let's get more stuff like that on these streaming services and not stuff like gaslighting and then disappointing everybody. That's all. I think we can all
if
agree
you
on
like,
that.
if you really liked quarterback, I highly recommend it. It's a derivative from Drive to Survive, so the
Oh
F1
yeah, Drive to
series that
Survive,
follows all the teams and the drivers.
Mhm.
Formula One,
That kind of kicked off that docudrama, like recapping the live season, going through these people's lives.
and then
Well,
Full
even Last Chance
Swing,
You.
Full
last
Swing, Last
Last
Chance
Chance You,
You,
Full
yeah,
Swing, and like the
yeah.
reason I haven't watched Drive to Survive is because I know I would get addicted to it. That's
That's I
actually
mean
real.
I fully
Like,
am. I fully am. I watch F1, practice on Friday, qualifying on Saturday, and the race on Sunday. Like I can't get enough of it now because of that show.
I mean, it's just so
So
fascinating to see a docu-series of what people have to go to be the best at what they do and make it look easy, and it's still really really hard what they're doing. That's also why I think I would like Full Swing, like something that's really difficult to do and do well. So Dylan, man, thanks for joining us today, man. We've been
dude,
wanting
thank
to.
you guys for having me.
Yeah, good friend of the show. We usually kind of leave this open for kind of anything you want to say, anything you got going on. Maybe anything you want to kind of talk about, like that whole like hot ones, this camera, this camera, this camera kind of thing. Um,
Yeah.
you have the
No, I
floor,
mean,
man.
I really appreciate you guys having me on. It was, a blast getting to recap the NFL, and really trying to predict what's going to happen because who knows what's going to happen. I mean, it's the NFL. It's not for long, as all of us like to say. So, I really appreciate it and, really enjoy what you guys are putting out and very thankful for you guys to have me on today.
We appreciate it, man. We love and appreciate
Thanks, Dylan.
you. Yeah, and we thank you, and we thank the listeners as always. This won't be the last time you're with us. We've got things. Casey and I have been talking about the NFL season and the football season in general, and stuff we want to roll out, and it's going to be a lot of fun. And I don't. If you guys are like me, a lot of my favorite sports podcasts get a lot more interesting when football starts. So, you know, but yeah, Casey, you got anything to add or sign off with?
We've got college football this weekend, so
We do.
tune in for that.
We officially, we are week one. Last week week 0. We have week 1 upon us. 1,000%.
Yeah, last week we just had Navy and Notre Dame.
Yeah, week 0 as we call it. It's really called Tease Week. That might as well really what it be called. But yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. So we'll be here to talk about it. So this is Kellen,
This is Kason.
And I'm Dylan.
and we will see you next time at the next stop.